Week 10 in the NFL kicks off at Hard Rock Stadium with the Miami Dolphins hosting the Baltimore Ravens. Week 9 for the Ravens was a familiar story this season. They once again fell down by double-digit points, but were led to a comeback victory by former MVP Lamar Jackson. And in a year with seemingly no dominant team in the AFC, the Ravens are in prime position to make a run at the Super Bowl.
Our team we fighters. You know, we believe in each other. You know, we got faith. Just got to keep it going. Hopefully, we won't be in no more overtime games.
As for the Dolphins, it's been a disappointing season to say the least. After posting double-digit wins last year, they were at least expected to compete in the AFC East. After a Week 1 win in Foxborough, they dropped 7 straight, but were able to snap the losing streak at home against the Texans Week 9.
It's good to get a win. It's good to get a win.
If the Dolphins are going to turn their season around against the Ravens, they're going to have to figure out a way to slow down Lamar Jackson, who put on an absolute clinic the last time he played in this stadium. Can Jackson put on another vintage performance in his hometown of South Florida? Or will the Dolphins pull off the upset at home and make it 2 in a row? Week 10 is about to get underway.
Seems fitting that the Ravens is one of the hottest teams in the AFC, kicking off Week 10 in the NFL. Our guys always bringing the heat here with us to preview this matchup. Ryan Wilson and Will Brinson, half of the Pick 6 podcast. Guys, we don't have to look too far for storylines in the AFC game here. Ryan, what's jumping out to you?
Sherry, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while since draft season. Glad to have you back there in Stanford. So, yeah, the big storyline for me, and this is something that you don't want to hear if you're a Dolphins fan, is are the Dolphins the worst team in the AFC? And at the beginning of the season, that would sound like a silly question to ask. We just heard Tommy Tran talk about they won 10 games last year. They should have gone to the playoffs. And now they've come out looking like an absolute train wreck. And to the level of where we're talking about, are they better than the Texans? They beat the Texans. Maybe they are. They're not better than the Jaguars, which is hard to wrap your brain around. They lost to the Jaguars in England. That was the Jags' first win of the season. And the questions are up and down the roster, especially in offense. They've drafted so many offensive linemen in the last 2 years, and they've struggled to find any consistency there outside of Robert Hunt. We know about Tua Tagovailoa. He was the 5th overall pick in 2020. They could have had Justin Herbert, but they went with Tua. Tua's been banged up. He's been inconsistent. He's played a little better this year, but not well enough to make you think or forget about Justin Herbert. And now we don't even know if he'll play this week. It'll be a game-time decision. Didn't play last week. Jacoby Brissett had to come in. And it sounds sort of silly to say that Brian Flores might be on the hot seat, but I would imagine owner Stephen Ross is wondering what's going on after that double-digit win season a year ago. So they have a lot of they're facing long odds against the Ravens. It's not a must-win game. They're a 2-win outfit, but they are not a really good football team. And then the question also becomes, what's the quarterback situation going to look like if Tua continues to struggle?
Yeah, Tua suffering or dealing with a fractured finger. Jonathan Jones saying it's going to be a game-time decision. So, Will, what about you? What are you looking for in this matchup?
Well, you know, quarterbacks as well, but on the other side, I think when you look at Lamar Jackson and the way that he's played this season, it's been kind of a revelation and jamming it in everybody's face. All the what was it? I think it was a report before the year from our old friend Jeremy Fowler, who said, you know, at least one league executive said that they figured Lamar out. Well, they hadn't, and Lamar's still awesome. And look, it's sort of like the Happy Gilmore thing. Somebody learned how to pass. He already knew how to pass, but now he's passing at a more prolific rate. 33.5 attempts per game for Lamar, up 7 attempts from last year and up certainly from his MVP season. He's not having to run as much, and he's 9-1 right now to win the MVP over at Caesars. That's like 5th or 6th best, I think. Certainly well behind Josh Allen and Tom Brady. But, man, go down to South Florida, which, by the way, Lamar Jackson, Hollywood Brown, both from about 25 minutes away from that stadium. There will be some interest in those two guys putting up big numbers, and I wouldn't be surprised at a homecoming if Lamar goes down there, lights up this Dolphins secondary, puts up something, I don't know about a 59 burger like he did to start off 2019, but puts 40 points on the board, throws a couple of touchdowns. We're going to get some serious buzz about Lamar moving up even higher in terms of MVP odds. And given how Tom Brady off, poor performances from around the league, it's entirely possible that we come out of week 10 with Lamar Jackson as the MVP favorite if he has a huge game on Thursday night.
I'm going to get into that, but first I do want to touch back on that last September game. You mentioned it. Lamar just lights out. He threw for 324 yards, 5 TDs. Could another outing like that, you think, Ryan, picking up what Will was saying, could push him in the MVP race?
Yeah, and Brinson brings up a good point because we have not been talking enough about Lamar Jackson. We've been so infatuated with Josh Allen, who's now sort of slowed down. Tom Brady, as Brinson mentioned, is also coming off not a great performance. Matthew Stafford, Brinson's favorite player on earth, is playing well, but they lost that football game. So the table appears to be set for Lamar Jackson to go off and prove to the doubters who are still out there that he is not an all-around good quarterback. We heard Will talk about how well he's thrown the ball this year. I think that will continue. They have absolutely destroyed the Dolphins in their last 3 meetings, and John Harbaugh is 8-1, I believe, straight up against the Dolphins during his career. I don't think that's going to change again unless they trade Lamar to the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins are in for a long evening, but I think Lamar is going to continue to prove doubters wrong, continue to play at a high level. And the biggest issue for the Ravens are two things. They tend to start slow offensively, and then they warm things up. And the defense is the biggest question mark, which is something we haven't said in a long time, Sherry. But as long as Lamar's out there, they are going to be almost always the favorite to win the football game.
It's like he's just on video game mode. Will, do you think it's going to take a 5 TD performance like that for Lamar to get back in the MVP race?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think you do it with 3 or 4. And, you know, the funny thing about that game from September 2019, week 1, of course, was that Lamar had that massive performance. He had it on 20 passing attempts. The Ravens actually ran 40 times, 40-plus times in that game. But what's crazy is that only 3 of those runs were by Lamar. It was a sit in the pocket, bomb it down the field, had 2 first-quarter touchdowns to Hollywood Brown. I'm telling you, there is a hometown factor at play here. You know, one's from Hollywood, Florida, obviously, and Lamar's from Pompano Beach. I mean, these guys are really, really close to that stadium. I think they'll be enthused by this. And I think Lamar could go out there. He doesn't even really need to run much. After 21 attempts last week, they may slow him down. I mean, I think if he throws for 300 yards or even 250 and 3 touchdowns, and they just, you know, wipe the floor with the Dolphins there on the road in primetime, he's right there in the mix. It will really probably be more determined how far Lamar can shoot up in that MVP race by what other teams and other quarterbacks do over the course of the weekend.
As you guys have both mentioned, the way the Dolphins have been looking as of late, there might be a chance that we see Baltimore just put on another clinic in primetime. Will, who's the guy you're looking to find the end zone for sure on Thursday night?
Well, if I'm doing anytime touchdown score, I'll take Mark Andrews or Hollywood Brown. Those would be the 2 guys that I would look for if we're talking anytime touchdown score. Not great numbers, of course. You see Mark Andrews plus 129 at Caesars, and Hollywood Brown actually plus 160 is pretty good. Now, Mark Andrews has a lot more red zone touchdown equity. If they get down there, they're going to look his way. But Hollywood Brown can stretch the field, killer deep threat in terms of being, it's just difficult to stop him with his speed. And they do use him occasionally in the red zone. I think Andrews would be my pick, though. If I'm betting on somebody, I'm getting plus money on Mark Andrews to score. I feel like there's a good chance it happens.
Yeah, I'm going to continue the Lamar Jackson is the greatest player ever theme, and I'm going to go with Lamar Jackson to score the first touchdown in this game on Thursday night. He only has 2 rushing touchdowns this year, but he rushed for 120 yards last week, over 80 yards the week before that, and it stands to reason that if you run a lot and you run far, you'll probably end up in the end zone at some point, and you're playing a pretty not great Dolphins defense. The overall, as we've talked about, the Dolphins aren't very good, but they're defensively, they haven't been great either. And I think Lamar's going to have opportunities. The only question becomes if they get to the 50 mark too soon, like the 3rd quarter, and he comes out for the backup quarterback, that's the only thing that I think that can stop him from going off. And also, the only matter after that is, does he get into the end zone, only because it hasn't done a lot this year. But at plus 122, I like the idea of Lamar scoring. And Brinson's guy, Mark Andrews, and Brinson's guys, Hollywood Brown, and anyone else you want to throw in there, Sherry. They're going to have a big night.
All of them. They're all going to be in the end zone. Will, what's a top prop you have for the Dolphins?
Well, the Dolphins, you feel a little questionable about it just because of, we don't know, if the Ravens come out and light them up, what are we going to get in terms of game script from Miami? It could be Jacoby Brissett throwing 50 times, which is an absolute nightmare. Good for, Gesicki props, of course, and all of that. But I'm going to take Salvin Ahmed to rush for over 13.5 yards. That juice was already climbing when we recorded the Pick 6 podcast Thursday night gambling show earlier today. So it may even be up to 14.5. He went for, I believe, 4 carries for 6 yards last week. But if you look at the previous 3 weeks, 7 carries and well over 20 yards in each of those those three. I realize that's not the most explosive performance, right? But this is a guy who has a regular role in that Dolphins run game. And Myles Gaskin was incredibly inefficient last week. It's something like 21 or 20 plus carries and less than 40 rushing yards against the Texans of all people. I think we could see a real swing back in terms of giving Salman Ahmed more carries there.
Two things. I was looking at the graphic there, and I thought it said Will Brinson over 13.5 rushing yards, and that actually could happen given how bad this Dolphins team is. And then Brinson talking about my guy Myles Gaskin. Here's what happened last week, Brinson. 20 for 34 rushes, average of 1.7 yards per carry. That ain't great. I'm going with Myles Gaskin over 22.5 rushing yards on that note. And here, just keep beating them. You'll get there eventually. It'll happen. Receiving yards, excuse me. He had 23 receiving yards last week on 6 receptions. And I think, here's the thing. He ain't going to get a lot of big plays, but I think he will get a lot of volume in the pass game. Also worth noting, while the Ravens defense is really good against red zone and on third downs. Look, the Dolphins ain't going to be down there in the red zone. Don't have to worry about that. They'll probably not be successful on third down. The Ravens do give them a lot of big plays, and that might be a one-time, one-hit wonder for Gaskin to get you over that 22.5 mark. I think he's the third leading receiver on that team after Gesicki and Jalen Waddle, of course, so he will get some opportunities. And if they get after Jacoby Brissett, who was sacked a million times last week in a game in which they had 5 turnovers, I think he'll get the ball out quicker, and that could mean more opportunities for Gaskin.
He just needs one real good deep pass, and then you're there. Let's look at Baltimore. Will, what's a top prop for the Ravens for you?
For Baltimore, I'm going, assuming the juice doesn't get wildly out of control, and I think I'd be willing to lay like 160 on it. Lamar Jackson over pass touchdowns, 1.5. As we mentioned, this is a homecoming situation for Lamar through those 5 touchdown passes the last time they played in Miami. I think he'll be extremely excited about getting down there in front of friends and family, throwing bombs to Hollywood Brown, working it to Mark Andrews. And I think you'll probably see the Dolphins try and stack the box to slow down the Ravens' run game. You're getting 33.5 pass attempts on average, or 33.7 maybe on average for Lamar each game, so far this season. I think there's a very good chance 2 of those find the end zone. I'll take Lamar over 1.5 passing touchdowns.
Again, it's Lamar Jackson show. I'm going with Lamar Jackson over 9.5 rushing attempts. Last week he had 21. Over the last month, he's averaged about 16 per game, and I think he'll have opportunities. I'm not saying they're going to shut down the receivers on the Ravens, that Dolphins secondary, but we know that Lamar Jackson can run. He's not looking to run necessarily, but when he gets in the open field or he sees an alley, he certainly takes it. And I think even if he only plays 3.5 quarters, by that point he will have eclipsed 9 rushing attempts and hit that over.
Baltimore is a 7.5-point favorite, total 46 in a hook. Ryan, which way are you leaning in this one?
Sherry, I can't believe you even have to ask that question. I'm taking the Ravens. I mentioned that John Harbaugh is 8-1 straight up against the Dolphins. He's 9-0 against the spread against the Dolphins. And this Dolphins team is a shell of the one that we saw a year ago. We talked about it a little bit. The last 3 matchups, the Ravens have absolutely blown the doors off the Dolphins. Brinson talked about last year's matchup, which they scored a 50-burger on them. The average margin of victory in those 3 games, 40.5 points. That is more than 7.5 if my math is correct. Look, maybe the Dolphins come out, maybe they play tough, maybe they hang tough, but this doesn't feel like a Steelers situation to me where they play down to the level of the competition and make it close, which is what they did against Seattle, what they did this week against the Bears. I think the Ravens come out with something to prove. Brinson mentioned the hometown angle there, and I think they easily get over that 7.5 number.
Yeah, I mean, look, you heard Brian Flores say that, he's like, I felt good to get a win. It's like, bro, you just won 17-9 against the Texans. Like, if they come out and play like that, the Dolphins, the Ravens will light them up. And John Harbaugh, we've seen him do this. Remember, Vic Fangio is already mad at him over it because he, was trying to keep that record going of 100-yard games. John Harbaugh ain't scared to run it up. He ain't scared to keep throwing bombs and to keep scoring. And I think, again, he will he knows what it means to Lamar Jackson to play well in his hometown there. And I think you'll see a lot of touchdown passes from Lamar. We may even see, like we did in 2019, well, we won't see Robert Griffin because he's in the booth, calling college football. But he was 6 of 6 with a touchdown in that game as well. It's a slightly better Dolphins team, but they're not playing like it this year. I like the Ravens minus 7.5, and had I gone first, I would have said the exact same thing Ryan did. I can't believe you had to ask.
We had to ask. We had to, even though we knew you guys were going to pick the fighting Lamar Jacksons. Will Brinson, Ryan Wilson, guys, we always appreciate the time. Good to see you. Let's get you a recap of their picks for Thursday night football. Your anytime TD score will going with Mark Andrews. Ryan Wilson, you're going to notice a theme here. He's liking Lamar Jackson. Then your top Dolphin props you have here. Sullivan Ahmed over 13.5 rushing yards for Will. Then you have Myles Gaskin going over 22.5 receiving yards. For Baltimore, both going with Lamar Jackson over 1.5 passing TDs. And then both sticking with the Ravens over the Dolphins. And get more from Will and Ryan on the Pick Six podcast. They catch up to speed on everything you need to know and what's trending in the NFL. Make sure you download and subscribe today.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.